and welcome. My name is Jakub Kalinsky and I'm a senior fellow in the Digital Forensic Research Lab, focusing mainly on Russian disinformation and countermeasures against it. And today it is my pleasure to welcome you to our latest edition of DFR Lab's Coffee Break. And during the next 15 minutes, we will discuss one of the most persistent, if not the most persistent, disinformation campaign of the Kremlin, which is the ongoing disinformation campaign about the MH17 tragedy. And I will be discussing it with perhaps the most relevant person for this, Christo Grozev from Bellingcat. Christo, hi, and great to have you with us.
Hi, Jakub. Great to talk to you.
Christo is the lead investigator with Bellingcat, focusing on security threats and the weaponization of information. And Christo and his colleagues in Bellingcat have done an enormous job around MH17, identifying the soldiers who are responsible for downing of the plane, tracing the missile system. But today I would like to cover mainly the disinformation campaign about this tragedy. Over the last 6 years, we have seen a lot of disinformation attempts from the Kremlin and the pro-Kremlin outlets about MH17. My ex-colleagues at EU versus Disinfo have registered over 260 various disinformation cases. Christo, I'm sure you follow them all. Which one of them do you find the most ridiculous, the most outrageous?
Well, it has to be the one with the plane being pre-filled with dead corpses that were thrown over eastern Ukraine by the CIA in conjunction with Israeli intelligence and Ukrainian intelligence, and with the help of the Dutch Secret Service as well. Now, this made a lot of well, people smile when it first came out, although it was in the middle of such a shocking tragedy. But for many years, I thought that was just a crazy invention by the local separatists or by the Russian mercenaries who were there. It is more recently that we found out through another investigation that this whole forgery, this completely outrageous version of events, was created in conjunction with the military intelligence of Russia. So it came from the Psychological Operations Department of the GRU. And that makes you think, I mean, if they can come up with something that is so ridiculous and implausible, it raises question about whether they ever wanted to create an believable alternative explanation, or were they just trying to create as many stories as possible, even as outrageous that nobody would believe as this one. Of course, there's always an audience for every conspiracy, and maybe that's part of their psychological operations, that they're preparing different layer of conspiracy theories for different audiences. But yes, that must be the one that shocked me most and I found the most ridiculous.
I believe it was Strelkov who started this one, or one of his soldiers?
He started it on his VK account, and then until recently has been saying that he's not sure that the people were alive. So yes, it's been promulgated until recently.
You have closely followed the trial. You were live tweeting about the process every day. Has the joint investigative team investigation surprised you anyhow? Was there anything unexpected? Would you highlight any piece of the investigation where you particularly impressed by anything?
Yes, we were surprised by some process of the investigation. We thought we knew almost everything because we've been following also the calls for witnesses, calls for additional information to be provided to the joint investigation team. But three things actually we found very new and shocking to us in a positive way. One was the fact that that the joint investigation team had in fact conducted 3 different live experiments with Buk missiles of the same type that was used to shoot down MH17. And 2 of these were conducted in Ukraine and 1 was conducted in Finland. This means they actually exploded copies of clones of the missile that was used to shoot down MH17. Now, nobody wrote about this in real time. No journalist found about these explosions. Russia had claimed that it has done the only only natural test, as they call it, conducted by Almaz-Antey, the manufacturer of the Buk missiles. And for many years, Russia was claiming sort of superiority in terms of the findings, saying we're the only ones who did it. Turns out that the Dutch investigation team did 3 of these. So this is one. The second thing is that they had apparently obtained satellite photographs of the launch location from the days before and the days after the shootdown. And the photographs from the day after the shootdown show a burnout area, exactly in the place that has been calculated as the launch site by a lot of econometric or reverse engineered calculations, both by the Joint Investigation Team and by other third parties. So this satellite photograph was something we were not aware of. We didn't think it was available, but it adds a lot of hard data for the judge or judges to look at, in addition to the more indirect evidence that has been gathered by the Joint Investigation Team. And the third thing that we found very impressive and new to us was the number and quality of witnesses, of eyewitnesses that they have been able to convince to come forward and speak to the investigative judge. Many of them will speak in live sittings, in live hearings in the court. Some of them will be speaking only in private sessions under disguised identities to the investigative judge, and questions will be asked through the judge by both the prosecution and by the defense team. But what, of course, we knew that there's a large number of witnesses. What we didn't know was that among these were former rebels, they call them rebels, but in fact former mercenaries, who had been on the ground near the launch site and had been able to identify some of the FSB officers who had accompanied the Buk missile. So this is very important, because in addition to just the data from telephone intercepts, from movement of the missile and the truck, and a lot of open source photographs that have registered this movement, there'll now be actual people who had no reason to lie. They were part of the, let's say, ideologically aligned with Russia at the time, and now they're testifying essentially against Russia. So I think these were the three things that both impressed us most, but also we found surprising, because we had no way to know that they were happening.
Now we talked about the investigation of the JIT, but you did a lot of your investigations yourselves, you and your colleagues in Bellingcat. Is there anything that you are particularly proud of, where the JIT confirmed you had the facts right? And is there anything you would like to highlight from your work?
Well, first of all, I have to say that we are extremely proud to hear the name Bellingcat in court proceedings so many times. I think we've heard it so far at least 10 times by the prosecution team. I'm sure we'll hear it in a negative sense also from the defense team when the defense starts talking on the substance of the case. We're proud of everything we've done. So far, nothing that we've contributed, both in publications, but also directly to the Joint Investigation Team, has not turned out to be inaccurate. But I would say that probably the one thing we're most proud of is where the Joint Investigation Team seems to have been initially wrong, and then we corrected them. This was the location of a photograph of the Buk teller, the truck with the missile, which the Joint Investigation Team published, I believe it was in 2017 on their website, and they said, we believe this has been, this photograph of this truck with the missile has been taken in the village or in the town of Makeyevka. And they asked for more geolocation help, or for people to find exactly where it was taken, the photograph. We, within a couple of hours, and by the end of the day, were able to geolocate it actually in Donetsk and not in Makeyevka. And now that has become part of the case file, and it is credited to Bellingcat that we were able to find the exact location of this place. We were not the only ones. There were some other journalists who went to the place and found it, but we were the first one who published it on that day. So yes, everything we've found has been validated so far. And one thing that we take pride is where we were more wrong than the Joint Investigation Team. I have to say that also there are things that haven't yet been validated by the Joint Investigation Team, but we are sure we are right about. For example, they asked recently in November last year for help in identifying a particular member of the Russian Secret Services who had been in charge, according to a lot of voice intercepts, telephone calls, in charge of providing the weapons across the border and giving them to the militants, including probably the Buk missile. Based on the voice and just on the secret name that was used for this person, Vladimir Ivanovich, we were able to identify the real person behind that. And he's one of the top 5 people in the FSB, a lieutenant general in charge of the border service for the FSB. His name is Andrei Burlaka. That has not yet been validated officially by the Joint Investigation Team, but we are sure that we were right in our finding.
And now finally to the enormous disinformation campaign of the Kremlin. They themselves and their media, they have spread a lot of conspiracies, a lot of disinformation, a lot of contradictory stories about the tragedy. Is there any particular claim of the Russian propaganda machinery that the joint investigative team debunked in a particularly impressive way? I know they were giving them the benefit of doubt and they were verifying and debunking an incredible amount of the stories that Russian propaganda was spreading. Is there anything you would like to highlight in this?
I think it's more of the systemic approach that the joint investigation team did in order to not allow Russia to continue, to be able to continue its disinformation campaign. The joint investigation team took for granted that Russia will try to delegitimize the outcome of the court case by saying, oh, they didn't do it thoroughly, they ignored completely our input, they didn't have access to a natural experiment like we did, and so on and so forth. So the joint investigation team went the extra 100,000 miles, not the extra mile, to test every hypothesis that Russia claims, as crazy and as improbable as it has been, in order for them to be able to say at the end, well, we didn't just take one version of events, we took all possible versions of events, including the ones proposed by Russia, and tested them for plausibility. And we concluded that they don't work. So they worked on 3 different scenarios. One is the main scenario, which is a book shot down MH17 from a Russia-controlled location. A second scenario that they looked at thoroughly was that an air-to-air missile from a Ukrainian missile air fighter had shot down MH17. And then a third scenario, which is that a book missile or some sort of a ground-to-air missile, but from a Ukrainian-controlled location had shot down MH17. By spending and giving enough effort and enough time to each of these 3 scenarios, the joint investigation team made it impossible for Russia to claim anymore that they were sticking to a predetermined scenario. This is one. The second is, as I mentioned earlier, the fact that they're not basing all of their findings on indirect data, on social media posts, or on anything provided by the Ukrainians, by the Ukrainian secret services. This has been a very, very steady accusation by Russia, including as a counter-defense of Russia in a different court proceedings at the European Court of Human Rights, where the families of the victims of MH17 have been suing Russia as a state for the last couple of years. Russia has been saying the data, the telephone intercepts, the movement based on metadata from mobile phones is all fake because it has been provided by the Ukrainian Secret Service to the joint investigation team. Now, in the court proceedings, we were able to find out that the joint investigation team never took for granted any data received from the SBU in Ukraine. On the contrary, they took every piece of data with a grain of salt, and they validated it by going back and requesting the raw data from the mobile operators, comparing it to other raw data from mobile operators from other countries to which phone calls had been made, and making sure that everything holistically matches with each other. Similarly, they had not taken into account, as Russia has claimed, for granted that the radar data that is missing in certain locations in Ukraine was missing for good reason. They went on the ground and did their own thorough investigation of why that radar was missing. And last, and I think very importantly, the joint investigation team in the proceedings mentioned how many times Russia has lied and directly misled the joint investigation team by providing either false data or by delaying the necessary and easily obtainable data by years. So I think with all of this, all the accumulated anger, one could say, within the joint investigation team over the last 6 years over Russia providing fake narratives globally, kind of burst out somewhat in the court proceedings, and the joint investigation team, the prosecution, made it clear that they're not buying this nonsense.
Thank you very much, Christo. Thank you very much for finding the time. And
thank you.
And, since this is a coffee break, are you drinking your coffee? I'm actually drinking. Yeah,
I'm drinking coffee, even though it's the afternoon.
How do you take it?
I take it always black with no sugar, and I usually have one in the morning as soon as I wake up before I pronounce my first words in the morning, and one in the afternoon, just like now. And that gets me through usually another investigation that goes until about 1 or 2 in the morning.
Brilliant. Thank you very much once more, and good luck in your future work.
Thank you very much.